Hey everyone, before you watch this bootcamp review, I want to apologize in advance for anyone watching the video version. We were running into some technical difficulties and ultimately decided on using a different platform from what I originally used. As a result, we lost grid mode, so we won't be able to see all the participants at the same time. I also want to add a disclaimer that this is a review based on the participants' personal experience. Please do your research and ultimately decide if a coding bootcamp is right for you, self-taught, or even traditional schooling. With that being said, let's get into the interview. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Tech Valley Coding Bootcamp review. In this series, we're going to be talking about, you guessed it, coding bootcamps. Lucky for me, I found two awesome people willing to share their experience at Codesmith. I'm super excited about diving deep, but before we do, Cody, Jin, can you give us a quick introduction about yourself? What did you do before Codesmith, and what are you doing now?
The years leading up to Codesmith, I was working as an electronics technician, just doing basic bench work for fire departments, police departments on their radio equipment. Started to mess around with JavaScript a little bit, learning some of the most basic concepts, and decided to enroll in a computer science degree online. Quickly got frustrated by the slow pace, and I felt like I wasn't learning anything practical. So I decided to make the jump to go to a coding boot camp. That's what led me to Codesmith.
Nice. What about you, Jin?
So I was in the aerospace field before, working as an aerospace engineer, and I went to tech for a lot of different reasons. One, I had tried doing a business by myself before with some friends, and that didn't work out, but it did give me an impetus to try and develop skills that I can take to building new companies. And also I felt like I had kind of completed what I wanted to do in the aerospace engineering field and was ready for a new challenge.
Got it. And before, you dove into a coding bootcamp, did either of you consider doing self-taught path? And what was your reason for choosing a coding bootcamp in general?
Personally, I didn't consider a self-taught path. So I kind of planned out the next year of my life, and I just saw that my career would make a jump if I went to a boot camp. Just the structure of it, the pace, the networking capabilities of the alumni, and the hiring program at Codesmith just all made me feel like I'd be better off going to a boot camp. But that's just a personal choice of mine.
So for me, I actually tried going the self-taught route just because I had a lot of background in programming already with MATLAB and VBA through my engineering career. So I was doing that for about a year because I was trying to finish up grad school at the time, so I didn't have too much time to learn on my own. And it got to the point where I was in this thing called the tutorial hell, where you just watch tutorials and try to follow along, and it makes sense then. But the minute you're off of that, you realize that you don't actually have the skills to recreate that. So that kind of put me into the situation where I wanted to go to a boot camp.
Right. And so just to clarify, you're trying to do this self-taught path for about a year, and did it just feel like you didn't really make enough progress to the point that you just needed something to like kind of speed you up towards like finding a career in software development?
Well, so in the beginning, it wasn't all about like, I'm trying to switch to a career now. It was more of like, oh, let's just develop the skills for me to be able to create my own app or understand software engineering in general and see, if I can get into the software engineering route without having to do a boot camp, because they are expensive. You're trying to save money. But the older you get, you realize that time is the more important resource here. So that led me to go to a boot camp.
Got it. And I know that both of you graduated. So Cody, what do you do now? And Jen, what do you do now?
Currently, I work as an engineering fellow with Codesmith for the full-time remote cohort. And I have about 2 weeks left on my contract, so I'm actively in the job search as well now.
Currently working as a senior software engineer at Capital One in New York. And I also did the fellowship after my cohort.
And what is a fellowship?
Fellowship is a 3-month contract that follows your 3-month Codesmith residency. And you play a mentoring role with the incoming residents, and you mentor the OSP groups and do the hack hours, the leak code style problem sessions in the morning. You proctor those, go over previous solutions, things like that. You do the some lectures as well.
Got it. And for you, Jin, did you feel like doing the fellow position helped you kind of be more prepared for the job hunt? And did you feel like overall you were becoming a better programmer or better developer during those 3 months?
Certainly, because as you're doing the fellowship, you're just looking at a lot more code, and also you're having to teach some of the concepts. So when you're teaching, you actually learn a lot better than when you're just
Right.
receiving it on the receiving end there. So I did feel like I had a better grasp of some of the technologies I covered.
Got it. Got it. And yeah, it sounds like there's a very heavy emphasis on the data structures and algorithms in Codesmith in general. And if you have to actually teach it, you have to kind of know what you're teaching. So
Yeah.
that makes total sense. So in terms of just coding boot camps, there's just so many out there, right? What ultimately made you decide on Codesmith?
The biggest factor with me were the objective reviews that I could find online. I tried to gather as many reviews as I can to try and eliminate any kind of bias and try and form an overall objective opinion on that based on people's experiences. I coupled that with some auditing statistics and just the general vibe that people get when they hear talk about Codesmith. And so that led me to sign up for one of their free workshops. And once I attended one of the free workshops, that did it for me. I felt like it was the right place, and so I made that decision at that point to attend Codesmith.
So what resources did you use to remove bias or just kind of this marketing scheme of coding boot camps? What did you use?
Reddit. Yeah. So yeah, definitely.
Funny enough, who would have thought in
browse
2022 Reddit would be the place to find objective data?
Yeah.
What about you, Jin?
So for me, I have a lot of friends that did boot camps, other boot camps. So I asked them about their experiences, about their respective boot camps, and what they would recommend me if I were to do one. And almost all of them just pointed to Codesmith as the golden standard of boot camps at the time. I took their word for it, but I also did some of the free events that Codesmith had put out, and I also did a 2-week program to see if I was a good fit for it. And once I did that, I knew that I wanted to do Codesmith over any other ones.
I know a few Codesmith graduates myself, and I actually know one that's attending right now. And it seems like there is a lot of upfront work that you have to do, whatever you want to call it, whether it's experience or just learning in general before you can get in. And I was just curious, like in your guys' experience, do you feel like there is a level of upfront work you have to do? And if so, what did that entail?
There's some basic JavaScript concepts that you have to learn to pass the technical interview, involving callbacks, higher order functions, recursion, and closures, as well as some object-oriented programming. And so you don't have to do anything advanced. You don't have to have professional work experience, but they do expect you to have mastered those concepts prior to admission.
Yeah, nothing too much to add to that. You are expected to have some basic computer science fundamentals under your belt before getting in.
How long did that take for both of y'all?
Personally, I prepared for about 2 months.
So it's tough to say like how much of the CS prep was required for me, because I had already done a lot of programming through my previous engineering job. So things like variables and functions I already had, but there were specific things like maybe recursion or object-oriented programming or closures. Those were all new concepts to me that I had to learn at CS Prep. So, CS Prep taught me a lot of that, but I think I spent maybe another month afterwards trying to hone those skills before applying.
And once you applied, I heard that you have to go through like a technical assessment. And I think Cody, you were talking about it before, like closures and all those things. Like, how difficult was it? How many people do you think pass, and how many people do you think don't pass? I guess I was gonna say fail, but trying to be a little nicer about it.
I have other bootcamp application experience to compare it to, and Hack Reactors, personally, to me, was a lot easier. But I went into the first one. It took me 2 interviews to pass Codesmith, and that's pretty typical, 2 to 3. And so They expect you to be able to code out problems involving those concepts, but at the same time, display your ability to break down these increasingly difficult problems, pseudocode, technical communication, and even when you encounter adversity, if you hit an error code, explain what that means to you and try and figure out where the problem went and how you're going to alter your strategy to account for that. They want to see your thought process, basically, in addition to being able to display mastery in those concepts.
Yeah, so with the technical interview at Codesmith, your technical abilities is maybe, one half of the equation of you getting in. It's also your soft skills that you have to develop, demonstrate in terms of, are you still able to communicate with when you're running into a problem? Are you explaining all of your thoughts so that, the person on the other side can understand what you're saying? So, because it's great that you can solve this problem, but if you're the only person that can solve this problem and understand this problem, then you're not very useful to a team. So I think that's what the things that Codesmith is looking for.
Yeah, it seems very thorough. I think sometimes people think that, oh, I could just throw a bunch of money at the school and they'll just accept me, and then I'm gonna somehow become a software engineer, right? Like it seems like, at least with Codesmith, there is a little bit of just upfront work you need to do and just kind of validating, like, hey, how committed are you to this? And it seems like they're even okay with failing students to see if they would reapply again. So I think that's a pretty interesting take. And maybe some could say that's like really exclusive. That's not like meant for everyone. But in my eyes, it feels like it's just more of like validating, like, hey, how committed are you to this? Like, we've given you feedback because you failed this first interview. Come back again. Let's just see if you've learned from this experience. And it sounds like maybe at the second or third time, they see that commitment. They see that you're willing to like look into the errors, read the errors, and not just be, oh, hey, magically I'm a software engineer. So I do like that. I do like that a lot. Speaking of price, how much did it cost for your coding bootcamp? And was it a in-person bootcamp or was it a remote bootcamp?
I paid $19,950, and it was a full-time remote immersive.
Yeah, so I paid about the same. Mine was also full-time remote.
When I did it in 2015, I only paid 12,000. So I feel like I saved a lot of money by doing it a little earlier, where there was less recognition, I guess.
The guinea pig discount.
Yeah, the guinea pig discount is actually kind of nice if you think about it that way. But yeah, no, at least for me, I actually, I make fun of myself because I was one of those people that just thought, like, if I just throw money at the school, they'll just teach me, right? So there was less of a thorough testing, I think, back in the day. But it seems nice that they're improving, because obviously, as you're scaling with more and more people, you have to make sure you're taking in the right type of students. So you both got accepted, and I assume that there was some time between starting the curriculum there's some time before getting accepted and starting the curriculum. What did you both do? And once you started, can you kind of describe your week by week program basis?
There's some pre-course material. I had about a month prior to Codesmith starting the cohort. The pre-course covers your basic JavaScript fundamentals, the things that they just want to reinforce in your mind before you start. And then they ask you to build out some website clones, Google clone, Instagram clone, things like that. Because they know at that point that you don't really have a lot of development experience. So you're going to be recreating these clones with HTML and CSS, just plain. And they don't teach those at Codesmith. So that's really a way for them to throw you into it and give you some exposure to those concepts. But the first week deals with JavaScript fundamentals again, data structures and algorithms. Week 2, you get into front-end development with vanilla JavaScript and React. Starting week 3, you get into back-end development with Node and Express. Week 4 is the database management systems. And then you'll do some more units on build tools and testing frameworks and things like that before you get into the project phase.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add to that. So this is on the first half of the cohort. And other than just like a merge stack and you learn Postgres along with that, nothing too much after that. I think Cody described it pretty well.
So the first 6 weeks, you're kind of doing all the learning, and then the next 6 weeks you're mainly focused on the projects.
Yeah, the tail end of that first 6 weeks, you're doing a little bit of projects here and there, learning how to use Git on top of that.
Mhm.
But yeah, I'll say the big project is towards the end of your cohort.
Got it. And so just to break down the learning part a little bit more, what specific tech stack were you learning? It sounded like there's a mixture of Mongo, Express, React, JavaScript.
Node.
Did you mention Postgres? So you do learn Postgres and Mongo, or?
Yes.
Interesting. And then you also learn Node.
Yep.
So how big was your cohort size, and how many teachers and TAs did you all have?
My cohort was 34 people. And then there were 5 staff members on top of that. There were, in addition to the fellows. So if you count fellows, there was 10 fellows, and then 2 engineering mentors, 2 engineering instructors, and a program coordinator. So if you count that, 15 staff and 34 residents.
What about you, Jin?
So there were 3 engineering mentors who were like the main instructors. There was a main instructor with the 2 sub instructors. And then there were, I believe, anywhere from 5 to 8 fellows at any time, depending on the cohort that you were. And then plus on top of that, there's like the program coordinators. And
did you feel like that was enough attention for y'all? It does sound like it's enough considering there's 34 students and there's 15 staff members, but what do you guys think?
Yes, I do believe that there's a lot of individual attention. And there's also things that they do throughout the cohort. They'll schedule you one-on-one sessions with fellows as a resident, just to ask you about your time, what's been troubling you, or what's been going well. We want to hear about your experience in depth. And so, yeah, you definitely get the feeling, at least with the full-time remote, that there's a lot of one-on-one attention.
I never felt like I was missing any attention. I think your mileage does vary depending on how much experience you came in with and how fast you're learning this material. But I think Codesmith also does recognize that. So they put a lot of emphasis on mental health throughout your cohortship. That one-on-one that we talked about. There's also an open channel for you to ask any technical or even non-technical questions to on Slack that all the fellows can see, and they're required to answer you in a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
Cody knows, he's in it right now.
Yep.
It's pretty accelerated in my opinion, but at the same time, I don't think any coding bootcamp is not accelerated, right? You're gonna feel overwhelmed, but at the same time, like learning React in like 1 week, that sounds pretty wild to me at times. So like, how did you deal with that level of accelerated learning? How did you cope with that?
Personally, I went in thinking I'm just going to immerse myself. I'm going to cut off any social life that I have and just commit fully to this, and I'm going to give it everything I have. But I quickly realized that's not enough. Like, you're not going to learn React in 2 days. So once I accepted that reality, I said, maybe it's not their intention for us to master React in 2 days. It's their intention for us to learn enough about React so that when we get into the project phase, we can work independently or as a group without needing help to be able to find the information that we need. And it's during the building of those projects that the knowledge really cements itself. So just an understanding and a perspective of what the program's designed to do helped me cope with the pace of it.
Yeah, I think the curriculum is designed in such a way that they lead you to the individual documents for that tech stack you're working with, and kind of translating a little bit for you to understand how to read the docs. And it's up to you to kind of read the rest of the docs and understand these little tidbits in here and there. But the main concept and ideas is taught during the Codesmith cohort.
Right. And maybe that's even solving your initial problem, Jin, back in the day when you were just in tutorial hell. Like they always just give you the information because it's in front of you, but now they don't give you that information. So somehow you have to kind of figure it out on your own. And eventually you kind of learn how to just walk on your own 2 feet instead of just carrying these crutches that, it's like, oh, I feel like I'm doing good work, but in reality, it was just kind of like a facade of you building projects. So I think that's a pretty good take. In terms of your cohort size, you started off with like 30 something ish. Like how many people did you end up with at the end of the cohort?
Yeah, I only had one person in my cohort leave, and that was because of like personal circumstances. It wasn't anything Codesmith related.
My cohort ended with the same number. There's no, I know other boot camps have this policy of dropping people if they don't pass certain tests or whatnot. Codesmith doesn't have that. The interview process is supposed, like the initial tech interview process is the weeding out part, and the cohort itself is, trying to build people up as best as possible.
Right. It seems like they do a lot of upfront work ahead of time to try their best to not let something like that happen. Obviously, everyone's going to have some special circumstances or the learning style is a little different, but it sounds like they make it pretty clear upfront on on their expectations a little bit. So that's good. In terms of how many hours per week do you think you studied and worked? Like, if you could put a number on that, what do you think that is? Remember, 40 hours a week is a typical work week. So,
Yeah, I would say Codesmith hours for residents is typically 51 hours per week, and that's within the time ranges that Codesmith operates. I did roughly 2 hours times 5, so an extra 10. And so I probably averaged around 60 to 61 hours a week, but still finding balance to rest and relax and things like that.
Yeah, I would say about the same numbers. I think around 8 o'clock every day I would switch off, but I would put those extra hours on the weekends, on Saturdays and Sundays.
yeah. So, were both of you also studying during the weekends as well?
Yes.
I took Sundays off typically. But I also I countered that because I get up early and I put in a couple hours each morning before Codesmith starts. So that's just what worked well for me. And then I could, depressurize on Sundays, just relax and make that self-care a priority.
Got it. Yeah, and I want to just break this myth, assuming that, hey, I attend a coding bootcamp, I'm going to find a job, or they're there to just teach me and hold my hand all the way there. The reality is, even for me, I would say when I attended my coding bootcamp, I was probably in the 60 hours per week range as well. And unfortunately, I decided to do the immersive experience in New York City in the winter. So I had to go through piles of snow and trying to get to this area as a California boy who'd never seen snow on a daily basis like that. So it was just this harsh reality that I was like, hey, you actually have to study and you can't just coast your way to becoming a software engineer. So I think that's one of the advice I always try to give to anyone that's considering a bootcamp. And I told Jin this as well. Hey, you're gonna have to commit a lot of hours into this because it's not easy as you think it is. And I know it's not as similar to school. It's a little bit of a slower pace because it's throughout a whole year. They're trying to cram everything into 3 months, and the reality is you're just gonna have to work a lot. So I don't think any coding bootcamp is immune to hard work.
So, yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm a true believer of projects, and it sounds like Codesmith dedicates a good amount of time for projects in that sense. So I was just curious, what type of projects did you both build, and how many projects did you make? And also, was it an individual project or was it a team project?
You build 3 group projects that are typically user-based, a blogging app, e-commerce, or whatever, just a full stack application. You build 3 of those with a group, and then 1 solo project, kind of the same format, some user-based application, full stack. And then you have OSP, which is your basically like a capstone project at Codesmith.
And all those projects are group projects?
With the exception of solo. Mm-hmm.
Got it.
There's one solo project.
How many people per project?
Typically 4 to 5.
Yeah, I think mine was pretty similar. So the progression of the projects is for me at least, it was a solo project first, and then there was the first group project that was a fresh idea. And then the next project was you had the option to iteration. So we would take on the project that the previous group did and then improve upon it. So you can either improve on the project that you had already done in the previous project with 4 other people, or go to another team's project and work on that. So after that is when your junior portion, your first half is over, And then the next 6 weeks, you're working with the same 4 people on this giant project.
And how are these project ideas come about? Like, do you as a group decide on, hey, we're trying to solve this problem? Do the teachers or fellows give you certain ideas? Yeah, how did you come up with the strategy to, number one, like come up with a project, and then how did you maybe even divvy up the work?
The project ideas are from the residents, and it's really all up to you. You have to pitch your ideas to them, and they tell you, this is why I think it may not be the best idea. This is why, so you come up with multiple ideas. They give you a mature opinion on why this may or may not work. And then everyone settles on an idea based on that. They want you to have their MVP features outlined, which is the minimum viable product. What do you want your basic app to have? And then maybe include some stretch features. If everything goes well and we get time to do this, this is what we'll add on to that. And then it's the group's responsibility to break the tasks into subtasks and set deadlines and things like that.
Yeah, so what Cody's talking about is the OSP, the big giant project towards the end of the cohort. The first couple projects you do with solo and the small team projects that take only a couple of days to do, those are largely kind of on your own, your own ideas, not too much I guess checkoffs that you have to do from the instructors. But then for the OSP, there is a huge process of taking a week of no lectures, no studying whatsoever. You're only trying to research on what kind of project you're trying to build for the next 6 weeks. So there you take a week long with your group to do that research. And then at the end of that week, you're supposed to present your ideas and get that checked off for you to be able to start working on that idea. And the instructors do stress on building something that's useful for developers, not necessarily just regular people. So they try to kind of steer your mind towards working with tech stack or technologies that are I guess like more in the tech world.
I am curious though, because 4 to 5 people on a project is pretty big in my opinion. And sometimes I feel like there's going to be some people unfortunately carry the weight of the project. How do you make sure that everyone is somewhat balanced out? And the reason why I'm asking you guys this is that you guys have both been fellows. So is this something that as a fellow you're aware of, that, hey, this person is literally committing 90% of the code and the other 4 people might not be doing as much? I mean, I'm obviously kind of showing the extreme case, but is it the fellow's responsibility? Is it the team's responsibility? How do you ensure that one person isn't just kind of just following along with the group, but not actually doing as much contribution?
Personally, what I've seen is, say there's 4 people, 2 will agree to work with the front end of the application, the other 2 will agree to work in the back end, and then they'll kind of work in pair, like a pair programming session, developing the front and back ends respectively. And between those 2, especially if they're working together, it's easy for them to split it evenly. I haven't personally experienced a lot of the kind of one-sided nature of things, but if that were to happen, there's open door policy. They can go to anybody about it, program coordinator all the way down to fellow, and it'll get solved by somebody.
When you get to the OSP portion, your senior portion of the cohort, each fellow is assigned to an OSP group that they are kind of responsible for mentoring. They are the ones checking in with the group, every week or whatever frequency that they deem is necessary to check up on, hey, is everybody distributing the work correctly? Is everybody doing the work? So things like that is kind of spreads out any risk of one person doing too much work over the others. And when I was a fellow, I personally tried to push for at least one person to be the scrum master so that they can be autonomous on distributing the work and getting through that agile process in their heads.
Yeah, that's really good. And did you use Git and GitHub to make sure and do like pull requests and all of those pretty standard, typical things you do as a developer to, get code merged into mainline and stuff like that? Awesome. Cool. So now I kind of want to transition into maybe the job search. And would you say that you start your job search during like week 10, 11, 12, or does it happen after week 12, after you finish all your projects? That's when the job search starts.
The hiring program starts around then. They're prepping you on everything from phone screens to technical interviews to resume development. GitHub, LinkedIn, all that stuff starts then.
So wait, sorry,
But they
starts at week 10, 11, or starts after week 12?
Yes, it starts around week 10. And they advise you to not really, start applying until after Codesmith ends. But I mean, there's nothing stopping you from doing that. But yeah, the whole hiring portion, prepping for the job search starts in week 10, and they advise that you wait to apply until after the cohort ends.
Would you have finished all your projects by week 10, or is it still kind of something you do in parallel, like you're working on your project and you start doing your job preparation?
Your OSP, the big project, kind of starts trailing off as the hiring portion starts ramping up, but there is a time of overlap by a couple days.
And how supportive was Codesmith during this job search process? Did they provide you any connections, or did they provide you any internal job boards? I know some coding boot camps do that. What was your experience like when starting to look for other companies out there to just apply for?
They don't have any internal job boards, but they do set you up with networking days, which is a phone call with a Codesmith alumni or the alum that is in the industry right now. And it can be a very casual conversation. And then they have you set up a mock interview with another Codesmith alum. And that can be like a simulation of a phone screen or something. But it's another opportunity for you to network with people in the industry that have that connection with Codesmith. But then they also give you a spreadsheet with everyone that's in industry from Codesmith and their contact information. So there's pretty good opportunities to network.
I still get emails through the alumni network, and in those emails, there's some open jobs that you can reach out to alumni for. So it's not like a complete job board, but that functionality is there, and I believe that they're working on it. And there's also a very active Slack community where I can ask, any questions from anything tech related to, hey, did you interview for this position at this company? Like, what's your experience like? Yeah, so there's a lot of activity on Slack there. There's also an unofficial Discord channel, I believe, that you can also participate in. So the alumni network is pretty strong.
So Cody, I know you said in the beginning of our interview about I knew Codesmith was where I want to go because of just the curriculum and the job search aspects of it. Did your expectations meet your reality? Yeah, just curious about your thoughts there.
As far as their preparation, their hiring program, I was like, it went beyond anything I expected. And I almost felt like that was a whole separate portion of Codesmith beyond the technical part that was really important and probably stands them apart from maybe their competitors. And there's this one guy in particular, his name is Eric Kirsten. And this guy has a silver tongue and he will teach you how to say anything. Like, you tell him, hey, this is my background. How do I present it to an employer to where it doesn't look like I just decided to switch careers, because you want to avoid that stigma. And he will give you a great way to say it, and so him by himself puts a lot of value into the hiring program. So yeah, I was highly satisfied with what I received at Codesmith.
Awesome. And ultimately, both of you decided to do the fellowship, or is it fellows, instead of pursuing a full-time job at a company. Was that a decision that you guys made after maybe a certain period of not being able to find a full-time job, or was it something that you knew you wanted to get into after you graduated?
For me, I kind of knew I wanted to do a fellowships since like day 3 of the immersive as a resident, because Codesmith does put a lot of emphasis on mental health and also imposter syndrome. And that's something that I really, really struggled with when I was first starting out my career in aerospace. And because I didn't even know what that term was until I really got to Codesmith and they described it and talked about it. And that's when I was thinking, oh, that's what I was feeling all these years. That really sucked. And that kind of led me to not just help my cohort mates out, but I wanted to kind of talk to other people and kind of help them through that portion. So that's ultimately the reason I did a fellowship. It wasn't really about job searches or anything like that.
I hadn't really considered it throughout my residency, but they tell you that even if you're on the fence about doing it, just apply anyway and see what happens. So I applied and I ended up taking it, but that whole process happens before you even finish Codesmith. So you don't even enter the job hunt or anything. You just transition from residency right into your fellowship contract.
After you finished your fellowship, how long did it take you to find your job at Capital One
I believe I had a offer in hand before I finished.
before you finished fellowship?
Yeah.
So during your fellowship, is there someone that's actually actively helping you, saying like, "Hey, you should do this while you're prepping, do this while you're not," like all that stuff?
I mean the previous fellows. So like how fellowship works is that when you're a resident, as you're finishing up your residency, only that those current residents are invited to be the fellows for the next cycle. So you stay, for the next cohort over. So it's like an ongoing chain of previous students teaching the next round of cohort mates. So that's the same way with fellows as well. So these fellows that are 6 weeks ahead of me are, I've seen them since my first day of Codesmith, and they already kind of know, you're going to have a tough time here. It's going to be really busy this week. So, maybe try not to schedule any interviews then. Actually, some of the engineering mentors, they told me not to. They kind of discouraged from applying to any jobs while you're in the fellowship as well, because fellowship is a little more time consuming than the immersive, believe it or not. So yeah, I did try to actively avoid that.
Was your experience the same, Cody, in terms of your fellowship experience? Maybe not the job hunt process. Yeah.
Yeah, just the fellowship experience. Yeah, it's definitely been time consuming, but I've made time to apply and do phone screens and interviews. In the daily stand-ups, they ask if anyone has any AFK times that they need, and that's any interviews or phone screens or anything like that. They allow you to step away to do that stuff.
So it sounds like you guys both had a pretty good experience at Codesmith, and you guys are both fellows, and it's this like kind of like this transition into becoming, I guess, quote unquote software engineers, whatever you want to call it. I am curious though, if you can you guys share some highlights and maybe even some lowlights, and what are some possible improvements that Codesmith can do for their students?
Yeah, highlights. I would say the OSP was a highlight to me. Just spending 6 weeks trying to build out a developer tool. Um, it's beyond any basic full stack app. So I felt like that was the highlight of my time. That and the hiring program. Um, Lowlights, I would say the fast pace of the curriculum. You want to spend more time with each topic, and so it takes a different mindset to just drop something before you fully understand it, pick up something else, and to continually do that for 4 weeks without fully grasping any of the topics. So I guess that would be the low light, and just gotta keep it in perspective, know what you're trying to do, and have faith that you'll get there.
Yeah. And any suggestions or improvements that you think Codesmith can do a little bit better? I mean, I don't think anybody gets 100% anything. So
Yeah, for sure. Whenever if someone doesn't pass it, there's weekly assessments. If someone doesn't pass an assessment, they schedule you one-on-one time with a fellow to go through that assessment and really teach them the topics one-on-one. And those happen over dinner periods, like lunch or dinner, and the hours are already pretty long. And personally, me, I value stepping away for an hour in the middle of the day to go eat. So that's really the only thing I think could be improved is figure out a way to fit those in another part of the day when you're not, eating your break times and stuff.
what about you, Jen?
Yeah, so kind of echoing what Cody said, I do really appreciate the time I spent with my OSP group. We actually still meet on a quarterly basis to check up on each other and see how each other is doing and progressing throughout our careers. So that's been really cool to see, especially because one of my group members, he had such bad imposter syndrome throughout the cohort, and seeing how he's doing now, it's just pretty nice to see, and see how he progressed into a really confident engineer. So that was really cool to see. The lowlights, it's probably the fact that I also did a fellowship on top of it, but like it feels like you're sprinting a marathon and you're just out of gas by like towards the end. And I think just the lack of time you have to do everything else in your life, that really gets to you sometimes. So it is a big commitment for not just you, but people around you as well.
Yeah, yeah, that's actually true. I mean, and that's one of the main reasons why I actually moved to a city that I knew no one,
Mhm.
because there's a huge sense of FOMO when all your friends are living normal lives and doing stuff on the weekends, and here you are just kind of just at home, just grinding this thing that doesn't make sense to you, and you start like questioning yourself: is this actually worth it? Did I spend
Yeah.
$20,000 on something that might not work out, right? So ultimately, for both of you, I'm sure it was well worth it because you guys are in really good positions, but it was obviously the hard work that got you there. So for a lot of new people that just are unsure about coding boot camps and maybe even specifically Codesmith, like what kind of advice would you give to them if if they were wanting to pursue something like this?
I would advise to attend any free resources that any boot camp has. It doesn't have to be Codesmith. Most for boot camps at this point have some kind of free resources to go through and learn basics of whatever they're teaching. Codesmith puts a lot of money and effort into their free resources, those workshops, the hard parts, their CSX online learning platform. So yeah, there's so much free stuff out there that there's enough for you to be able to make a decision for yourself, which would be the best route for you to go.
Yeah. For anyone thinking about going to boot camps, I would advise them to avoid that tutorial hell where you just have on Udemy and you have your dinner in front of you and you're just watching that video. If you're not actually hands on the keyboard following along, then you're just wasting your time. And your time is way better spent doing those free programs that Cody's talking about, or even paying a little bit of money to do the CS prep to really find out if you're ready for this or not. Because watching videos is easy, but recreating a program is not. Avoid that hell.
I would even take that one step further, is try to do it yourself without a video, because I kind of describe it like I'm not a good drawer or artist or whatever you want to call it, but I could trace over something and it looks good, right? But then when I actually try to do it myself, holy crap, it's horrible, right? That's kind of how I even feel with videos and just trying to follow along. Obviously, that's step one, but I think the actual final step is to try to do it yourself and experience those errors, read those errors, because a lot of tutorials, they don't show you the errors because they want to keep it really smooth and fast and all of those things. So yeah, really, really good advice. But yeah, first of all, thank you both for sharing your experience at Codesmith. Yeah, I really appreciate it. And I know that this is going to be super helpful for anyone like looking at alternative ways to get into this industry. But before I let you all go, if people want to reach out to you, what would be the best way to get a hold of you?
I can be reached through LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on my LinkedIn, so um, just go to my LinkedIn and you'll be able to hit me up.
Yeah, same LinkedIn. I believe you'll be putting our links in the description below, right? Yeah.
Yes, I will do that. So yeah, definitely will include those links. Definitely feel free to spam them if you feel like.
I will say, if you're gonna do a message, prefix it with, "Oh, hey, I came through Tech Rally," because after you start working as a software engineer, you get so many LinkedIn invites and messages that it's hard to kind of filter through.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. That's true. And Cody, now that you see that someone else has gotten a position after fellowship, maybe you could get a little nice referral. That's the benefit of a coding bootcamp. So
Yeah, send your
yeah.
resume my way.
Oh yeah. I mean, Capital One is like numero uno for hiring Codesmith grads. They hire so many of them.
so what he's saying is he has already too many referrals, Jen. So he doesn't need you.
No, we
No,
can we
no,
can, we
actually
can grow
don't.
our group a little bit bigger. We have an internal
Uh,
Codesmith chat within Capital One, so
That's
we're always
awesome.
welcoming new people.
is
That's
that a
awesome.
Slack channel?
Yeah, yeah.
Wow, you got your own Slack. That's crazy.
I mean, yeah, that's definitely the benefit of like, having a very tight knit cohort. So, or just coding bootcamp in general. So that's pretty awesome to see. Again, thank you everyone, and to anyone that's still listening, I say keep building developers. Your time will come. I'll see you guys later. Bye.